All right, so here's the sterilizer, 55-gallon drum, stainless steel. At the bottom, there is a heating element. Right now there's actually some water in here. And then there is the float valve. The float valve, when the water level gets too low, it lets water in. I have a street elbow here on the drain, so that way the water drains out fully. And right now I just have a little down cock kind of thing. But if you just have a garden hose running off of this, and that's what this connection is. This is a garden hose thread to 1/2 inch. Just run a garden hose, preferably the high temp garden hose. That way, and have it go down and it'll siphon. So if you have, as long as the end of this hose is lower, it'll siphon. And that's what the purpose of this is, to siphon. Over here, you'll see the element. This is made by Hot Pod by Brewing Hardware, and this thing kind of just screws in tight if it's loose, so that's good. And it pops off, like if you kick it, it'll pop off, so that's why I have it in the back over here to where it's protected. It is grounded, that's what that screw is grounded through the case, and that is grounded by contact with the threads and the lock nut up to the drum. So this right now is a 2000 watt element, so it's going to take a 20 amp circuit. You can't run it on a standard 15 amp circuit. For controlling it, I have a Sylvania 20 amp 24-hour timer, and if I do, right now I can even set it to where I actually run 22-hour cycles. So every time I do it, it'll go that same setting. If you get what I'm saying, like when it'll run the setting, when you hit 24 hours, it'll automatically remember what your last setting was. So I just hit 24 hour go. It'll run for however many hours. The main thing is you want to figure out how long you want to run it for. Measure your top bag temperature, and then you want to run it from when it hits about 200 Fahrenheit. You want to run it for another 8 to 10 hours from that point. Over here is my water supply. Two things to note. I have the red high temp hose. That is because if you don't run a high temp hose right here, where this coupling gets very hot, it'll heat up this pipe, and it'll heat up this section of hose. And if you use crappy hose, it'll swell and bubble and eventually fail. And if that fails, you're going to run your sterilizer dry, burn your element out, and then the cycle's not going to run complete, which means you have to empty out the whole bag, the whole contents of the bag of the sterilizer, and then you're going to have to fix your element and then repack it and then run it again. So just get a good, like these are $30 I think each, 25-foot length. I wish I could find a 6-foot length one or a shorter length one. I haven't searched too far yet, but I'm sure they're out there. Okay, and then the other thing I want to point out is this is called a RV, like recreational vehicle, like for when you go out camping, regulator. So look up adjustable RV regulator, and you want to get one with a gauge. That way you can dial it in. Right now I'm running about like 19 PSI. Anything 19 to even 5 PSI is what you need. The main thing is you don't want a lot of pressure on that ball valve, the float, because, well, two reasons. Because it means that the float has to be lower in the water, like there has to be more force on the ball pushing it up, means there has to be more water at the bottom, and that also means that the arm has to be higher, so you lose out on capacity because your false bottom has to be higher as well. So for this one I went super simple. I took an old table, like a stainless steel table, got one from a scrapyard, and I cut it into strips, and I cleaned it up, and then I put a little acid on it to give it the oxidized layer so it won't rust. And then, so one goes right here, and then here's the other one. This one goes right there, and you can see I do the drain and the element over here, so that way they can get hit by it, no big deal. You don't want it to get near the float, because then there's the potential that it interferes with the valve. So you always want the float in the middle and the element on one side and the drain on the other. So then it's just another piece of a table. This is actually a little shelf. It's a little bit thicker gauge than the table was. And it had a very convenient little brace in it. So I left that. And again, I ground it down and with a clean grinder. That's the other thing. You don't want to use any tools that were previously used on ferrous iron, because like if you use a flap wheel that was used on steel, it'll put carbon into your stainless and it won't be stainless anymore. So that's pretty much it. Now I have the false bottom in. There's no need to drill holes. Heat's gonna find its way through. It'll come around here, and then also heat will radiate through the plate as well. With the lid, I just have a really simple, it's a 5-gallon bucket lid, and I have one hole. I'm going to drill a couple more holes for venting purposes, because last time it kind of pressed up against the bottom of this and there was a little bit of pressure inside the tank. So I'm going to drill this out a little bit more to let it vent through more. The purpose of this is so that if I just had one hole and I filled this up all the way to the top with bags, and a bag like inflates a little bit, it'll plug that hole and make a bomb. So you want to have some kind of plate, either something like this or something like, I wouldn't do something like this. I would do what I with my Presto. Oh, it's over here. No, I don't know where. They have the Presto ones too, where it's a solid plate about a foot diameter with all holes in it. I just can't find it at this moment. So you want to have something covering your vent hole. And I have 2 vent holes, so always have a backup hole. So there's one vent hole here, and the backup vent hole is what I use to zip tie the that pail to the bottom side. That's pretty much it. Locking lid, you put the locking lid on, it's self-explanatory. You should only have to test the temperature, as I was explaining before. You should only have to test it to see when it hits 200 Fahrenheit for like a cycle or two, like your first 2 times using it. Then after that, you should know like how long it takes for the run to take, and then you just go off of that number. Unless you start like packing more bags in, or you change your substrate to where the substrate weight is significantly more. It would all go off of your substrate weight. So if you're doing half as much substrate weight, it wouldn't take quite as little as half as much, but it might take 4 hours less of a cycle, because that 1200 watt element, or I'm sorry, the 1500 watt element or 2000 watt element is not going to have to heat up as much volume, as much weight, as much density. So so if you're running the same batch every time, which right now I'm doing like about 100 pounds of dry substrate with about 120 pounds of water in like 40 or so bags, like 38, 40 bags, that takes about a little bit less than 24 hours to sterilize. I haven't really played too much with less than 22 was the least I've ran. But if you want to play with that, you only have to do that like 1 or 2 times. So that's pretty much it. And then I also vent, so I have a old garbage picked fan from a bathroom, and this is very crude, but it just sits up here. And then I have some like 6-inch poly tubing, and it'll either go into my grow area, and that's Jose over there. What up, Jose? Yeah. And then that it'll go into there. It'll humidify. It'll preheat the air, which is especially important now in the winter. Very dry, very cold here in El Paso. And then up there is the dryer duct. That's for when I'm venting in the summertime, when I don't want it to get any hotter in the garage, and I want to remove as much heat as possible. So during cool down, at minimum, you need some, I would recommend, I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary, but especially if you're in a dirty environment or you want very good results, you want to get either a little desktop HEPA filter, and this is a HEPA, this is a desktop filter that I went and purchased the additional like $30 or $20, an actual true HEPA filter. So this just recirculates like, I don't know, 25, 30 CFM of HEPA air in here, and that'll help during cool down. I'll turn this off once the cycle is ran, and then just recirculate the air inside of here with that. If you don't have one of those, or usually you can get them from a thrift store, like the bigger ones, because people buy them and then don't really use them. So you can get them from a thrift store, just throw a new filter in it, you're good. Otherwise, turn your HEPA on. your flow hood on, and your flow hood will clean the air in here. So that way, as the bags cool down, they're sucking in, if any air does leak, because if you fold the bags right, they should breathe through the filter patch, but we know we don't live in a perfect world. So if one of them leaks, it's going to leak HEPA cleaned air, not dirty air. And it's okay that it doesn't have to be within the airflow. Like this is not blowing onto that. It's just in the same room, and that is clearly not blowing onto the intake of that. It's just the idea of it scrubbing the air in the room constantly to reduce the spore count. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'll make another video on packing it right now to continue this.